Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. For more than a year, St. Louis has been weighing the idea of leasing its airport to a for-profit entity. The idea is that a big cash payment up front could help a needy city, while the corporation making it could recoup the investment by maximizing future profits. An army of consultants has been billing to the tune of $800,000 a month as they work to set up the parameters. Last week, the city's airport working group approved a request for qualifications. Joining me in studio to talk about the privatization process is Mayor Lyda Krewson. Mayor Krewson, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sarah.
There have been so many people working on this exploration for what is now 17 months, and they've been billing hundreds of thousands of dollars every month to get to this point. So now that we know what we know, are you more or less interested in airport privatization than you were when you first took office?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the information that we have learned over this last year or so, as this team of professionals, and there are airport professionals, there are financial professionals, as these team of professionals have really dug into our airport, how our airport works, some of the things that we might be able to do. I'm very interested in how we can make improvements to our airport via that information. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that's through privatization or not is a whole nother question. But I know that we didn't know a lot of this before we had all these professionals working with us to study it. And we have a working group, mm-hmm. which is made up of our budget director, Lyda Martinez, deputy mayor. I think you've interviewed them.
Yes.
A representative of the comptroller's office, Rhonda Homnabrigi, Marlene Davis. So we have a big group of city people that are working with the advisor team. And we've learned some really interesting things that I think are compelling to try to make us figure out how to have a better airport. For example, there are 1,000 acres at the airport of developable property. Mm-hmm. Well, what should go there? I don't know. Should it be cargo facilities? Should it be a hotel? Should it be, there are all kinds of alternatives. We also know, and we knew this before, but this has just been brought home to us, that the airport has over $600 million in debt. That debt is primarily a result of the billion-dollar runway that we built that we used to call W1W. Now I think it's called L29 or something like that. But so that debt and that runway has prevented us probably from doing some things at the airport that would be good to do for improvements. But it also presents an opportunity because that big new runway, new-ish, I should say.
New for St. Louis.
Newish runway only lands less than 10%, lands and takes off only less than 10% of the flights at the airport. So we've got all this debt, we've got this big runway, and it's primarily not used. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the opportunities. I'll call them, some people might call them problems. I tend to look at things on the positive side, opportunities for how we might, number one, get a better airport. And why do we want a better airport? Because your air traffic and your flight opportunities and your cargo all should be assets to your economic development efforts. Monsanto/Bayer, all of these, Millipore Sigma, AB InBev, large companies, Emerson Electric, who have a lot of travel and international travel, would be more likely to expand more if we had more
direct flights,
more options.
Yeah, I could see that.
More flights to more places more often.
But so tell me this. I mean, you say this process has been really good and you're learning a lot about the airport and its potential. But at the same time, we did learn from Deputy Mayor Lyda Martinez when she was here that the consultants won't be issuing a public report. Why, if there's all this interesting stuff that's coming out of this process, shouldn't that be a report that we could all take a look at and digest?
Well, That's interesting. I've read some of that. So in the RFQ, which is available online, a lot of this information is there. So that is a report. I
So you
put
feel like
that
the
in
info
quote.
went into
the information
that.
is there, and then after we get the responses to the request for qualifications, which will be on the responses are due November the 1st, so not that 20 days from now. After we get those responses, there'll be a short list of teams that will then be invited to respond to the request for proposals. I don't have any idea right now what we're going to get out of that. There might not be any proposals that we're interested in.
People may decide this is just too big a pain in the neck to even go down this road.
Well, it's very expensive for these teams that are going to propose. And you probably know this, but Chicago Midway Airport has been through this process twice. The first time they were the team on the other side, it was right during the financial collapse of 2009-10. The team could not close the deal, and Chicago kept a large sum of money. The second time Chicago went through it was in 2013, I believe. They only got one proposal, and it wasn't something that they considered good enough, and they dropped
away.
it. They walked away. So all things are on the table at this point in time. And of course, we're going to learn a lot. We need to be thinking about our airport not for this year or next year, but do we need a new terminal? Let's think about that.
Yeah. Is that something that has been talked about in these sessions?
Well, if you're thinking, I don't know that it's been talked about in the sessions, but if you're thinking long term on your airport and what it means to the economic development of your city, well, you need to be thinking about those kinds of things. And airports around the country are building new terminals, as you know. Kansas City's building one. Dallas Love Field has built one. There are lots of them underway, and so we need to be competitive for the next 10, 20, 30 years, not for the short term. This isn't about the short term, of what are we going to do in 6 months. Our airport is well managed. It is on an upward trajectory. We have 15.6 million flights, I think was the number for last year. Flights, that's takeoffs and landings, people. Now in 2003, we had 30 million, but we know the world has changed tremendously since 2002 or 3.
A lot of consolidation.
So now we're about half the size. Consolidation in the airline industry, and of course TWA/American, left as a hub. Thank goodness for Southwest Airlines, who stepped into that void and now has over 60% of the traffic in and out of Lambert. So a lot has changed. We need to be thinking about long-term, the good of our airport, and what the future of air travel looks like.
Now let's go back to this potential privatization deal. Now you've gone on the record as saying you will not object to a vote of the city's residents
after we have a
privatization.
proposal.
Yeah.
After we have a proposal.
Will you commit to making sure that vote happens before any transaction closes?
Well, it's actually not. It's not my commitment to make. So there are 4 entities that would have to approve any proposal that was put forward. One would be the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. That's a 3-member board. One is the 29-member Board of Aldermen. The other is the FAA, and the other is the airlines and the FAA. So it would really be the Board of Aldermen who would decide that they don't want to make the vote, or that they want to take the temperature of the voters in the city.
But don't you think if you stood up at City Hall, held a press conference, and said, the people need to vote on this, and I'm going to make sure that this happens, that would be something where the aldermen would take your cue on that?
Maybe, maybe not. I've stood up and said, we need to lift the residency requirement for our police officers for hiring. And if you noticed a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, the Board of Aldermen, the Board of Aldermen doesn't see it like that. Yeah. So I really see this as a call by the Board of Aldermen.
So you won't call for them to go for the public vote. You think they should be the ones to decide whether or not to pursue that?
I think we need to look at, if there's a proposal that is so good or so promising that we all agree that I put all in quotes, that most folks agree that we should go forward, then there's no necessity for that. But, the public will have to be involved. There have to be a lot of public meetings, have to be a lot of public input. And I'm going to leave it up to the Board of Aldermen as to whether or not they want to give their vote to a citywide vote.
Okay. Let's go here to the phone lines. We've got a caller, Jim calling from Bridgeton. Hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. As a resident of Bridgeton, I follow airport matters very closely, and I've called in and spoken with both Ms. Green and with Mr. Reed. And frankly, the public is highly skeptical of this entire situation. It seems like the city is just looking for a big payday, and there's been no talk about what the money is going to be used for. Mr. Green's answer to my question made almost no sense. So I just want you to know there's not a lot of trust out there for what's going on, because there really isn't much information about what's actually going to be done with this big payment if it actually takes place.
Jim, thank you for that call. Mayor Krewson?
Jim, thank you for the call. I know if you live in Bridgeton that you do follow airport matters very closely. So I hear you. There it's not just about the money. Although I will say this: we live in a city that has a lot of financial needs, and this is an opportunity for us to meet particularly some of our transportation needs that we have in this city. Or I should say it could be an opportunity for that. We don't know because we don't have any proposals yet. But we still are not, I'm not going to be for this if this doesn't get us a better airport. It has to do both things. It has to both provide good economics for the city, and it also has to get us a better airport.
Okay. Jim, thank you so much for that call. If you're listening at home and have a question for Mayor Krewson, you can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL On Air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. Now, Mayor Krewson, before we get back to the airport, I had a question on a different topic for you. Your public safety director, Jimmy Edwards, was on our show last week, and he's drawn some fire for comments he made about the children who were killed in St. Louis this summer. I'm going to play for our listeners here the question I asked and then how he responded. Judge Edwards, it has been such a violent summer in St. Louis. We've seen child after child die because of gun violence. How do you keep kids who want to be superheroes and who want to make a difference, how do you keep them from despair in the midst of a summer like this?
Well, I think that it is important that our children do not engage in risky behaviors. I've been very careful not to talk a lot about the children this summer. Many of the kids that unfortunately were violently killed were teenagers engaging in criminal behaviors themselves. And so out of the 13, about 8 were engaged in criminal behaviors that resulted in their deaths. Our youngsters, our children that were killed this summer were placed in situations by adults that they should not have been placed in. And so when children are put in positive situations, we have positive results. When they engage in criminal behaviors, unfortunately, we end up with 13 children dead.
That's Public Safety Director Jimmy Edwards, and I wanted to play those remarks in their entirety so people could get the context. Now, Arch City Defenders has condemned the comments, and they've formally called on you to condemn them as well. Do you do so?
So Judge Edwards cares deeply about the kids in St. Louis, as I do and as I know your listeners do. This is a guy who has spent his life trying to keep kids safe as a juvenile judge, and then actually starting a school for kids that had couldn't be in the regular school system in order to try to help these kids lead productive lives. And so I will tell you that I think Judge Edwards' heart is in the right place, and his behavior backs that up. We know that in our city, and most cities, drugs are at the heart of much of this violence. That does not mean that these little kids were engaged in drugs. These little kids were not. But they were in situations at least in some cases where drugs were involved. It is tragic. We have failed. As a community, as a society, we have failed kids that are placed in these kinds of situations. None of these kids, none, let me be clear, none of these kids deserve to die, even if they were involved in activities that we wish they wouldn't be. It's just a situation where we have to do better as a community. You think about St. Louis public schools. 19% of the third graders in St. Louis public schools read at third grade level. Said a different way, 81% of the kids at St. Louis public schools don't read at grade level. These are long-term issues. No one blames these kids. No one, including Judge Edwards.
I think that's kind of where people got angry about this, is they felt
Correct.
that he was blaming these victims for their own death. In some cases, we've got 3-year-olds, we've got 7-year-olds playing in the yard.
We had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and 2 10-year-olds. So tragic. I mean, it's almost unspeakable. But we have to speak about it. And so it's very tragic. No one, including Judge Edwards, is blaming these kids.
Okay. Well, that's. I'm glad we got a chance to clear that up there. I'm sure some listeners still are not going to be happy with that. I think they might have wanted a condemnation there, but that's definitely that's your perspective, and that's Judge Edwards.
I think Judge Edwards has lived his life proving that he cares about kids, and so it's hard when you take a quote sort of out of context. It's maybe hard to get the full picture, but
yeah. It sounds like he has your confidence going forward.
he does.
Yeah. So our phone lines are currently very full. I'm going to get to those callers in a minute. First, we have a question that came in through email. Matt from St. Louis writes, from Rainford to Wabi to Boyd to Casas to the former mayor himself, that's referring to Francis Slay, the lobbying efforts on behalf of potential Lambert privatization bidders Oaktree and Ferrovial are littered with former members and close allies of the Slay administration. Are you concerned that this Lambert privatization process has been designed to squelch competition for the privatization contract?
I think this is way too big of an opportunity for anybody to care about who works for what company.
You don't think insiders are trying, or former insiders are trying to rig this deal and scare off some outside entity that doesn't have ties in St. Louis?
I think it's ludicrous to think that any big outside entity would be scared off by any of these players, quite frankly.
People who've been big insiders in City Hall?
But they're not insiders now. And we have a very, very firm conflict of interest policy for anyone. I mean, I have not talked to any of those people, even for 30 seconds, about this. And frankly, I sort of avoid them because I don't want even the appearance of a conflict there. This decision will be made strictly on what is in the proposals that we get. And if none of them are good enough, well, then we won't go forward with any of them.
Okay. Let's go to Harry. He's calling from Brentwood. Harry, hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, Harry, what do you want to talk about today?
I think they should, in the interest of truth in advertising, when this group says they want to privatize the airport, they should also say they want to profitize the airport, because that is the true intention of it all. And the profits are going to go to private entities, not to the city. I think it's a bad idea all around. It's kind of like selling your house to pay credit card bills. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the fact that it's backed by Rex Sinkfeld also makes me very suspicious. He backed the Better Together plan, where they thought it was a great idea to merge the city and the county and put Steve Stenger in charge of it all for 2 years. I couldn't believe Mayor Krewson went along with that idea, and I'm wondering why Mayor Krewson wants to go along with this idea.
Harry, thank you for that call. I'll turn it to Mayor Krewson.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry. Appreciate the call. So I think what we have here is a situation where we don't know whether we have a proposal that we want to go forward with or not. Let's wait and see what we get and whether or not we have confidence, and this is going to be very, very important. It's not just about the numbers. Do we have confidence that that team can really deliver on whatever it is that they're promising in the proposal? So all that is extremely important. With regard to, I mean, our region is very, very fragmented. Frankly, probably more people in St. Louis County fly in and out of the airport than they do in St. Louis City. I'm confident of that since they have 1 million people and we have 300,000. And so the fragmentation that we have here is pretty detrimental to coming to good decisions. But that's what we have.
Does Rex Sinquefield's role give you any pause in this? He's a libertarian. He certainly has more right-wing politics than you or others in the city.
Right, he does. Most of your listeners probably know this, but I don't take campaign contributions from Rex Sinquefield. I never have. I've been an elected official for 21 or 22 years. My politics and his politics are completely different. For him to fund essentially the research component of this, we've learned some things. That has been helpful. But I don't meet with Rex. I've met with him once since I've been the mayor in 2.5 years. I don't take money from Rex, but I appreciate that there are people that are willing to do research because government doesn't do a good job of doing research. We're very short-term thinkers because we're always looking to the next election. That's not good for our for the efficiencies and for the long-term good of governments.
So thank you, Harry, so much for that call. Let's go to Charles. He's calling from North St. Louis. Charles, hi. You're on St. Louis on the Air.
Yes, how you doing?
Thank you for calling in. What would you like to talk to the mayor about?
Well, I want to talk to the mayor about the city workers. What will happen to the city workers if this passes?
That's a great question. Mayor Krewson?
Charles, thank you for that question. I should have already brought that up. So what we have written in the RFQ and will continue in the RFP is that all the city workers at the airport will have to continue to be employed if they choose to be employed for at least 5 years. Of course, they still have to come to work and do those kinds of things. But yeah, we are very committed to taking care of the workers at the airport. There are about around 600, I think, is the number of workers at the airport, that folks who work for the city. So we're very committed to that. And we know that there's been a lot of worry about that. And that is one of the things that we do want to get out there, that we're going to take care of those workers.
Charles, thank you for that call. We also got a tweet from Gina. She says, if privatization is profitable for the company that would ultimately win the airport contract, why shouldn't the city hold on to the asset and keep the profit for itself? I'm a longtime city resident, and St. Louis needs every penny it can get.
That is a really great point, Gina. St. Louis does need every penny it can get. You know, we need to pay our police officers more competitively. We need to put more money into mental health. We need to put more money into summer jobs for young people. So many things that we need funding for. But by law, the city of St. Louis cannot take out any more than it's 5%. Right now, it's about $6.5 million a year from the airport, and that is a federal law, an FAA law. So it's not that we will be able to profit, as you put, I put that in quotes, through new development at the airport.
Okay. And we also did hear from a listener earlier who asked, if St. Louis is just interested in developing some of this land that is near the airport, why not just privatize that process? Get somebody to serve as a master developer and do that. Couldn't that be a way of biting off part of this without giving away this great asset here?
Possibly, although I think there are a lot of restrictions on, well, what was that land? What funds was that land bought with? Were they FAA funds? Were they federal funds? And since this is a program by the FAA, you have more flexibility. You know, the FAA is not very interested in really funding airports much. And that's why they are also pushing this privatization program. For your listeners, one thing that they should know is that almost half of the airports in Europe are operated by private operators. So while this is very unusual in the United States, it's not unusual around the world.
Okay. How closely have you followed the situation in the Denver airport? We have, our newsroom has covered this, that they had to pull the plug on a $2 billion airport construction and privatization deal, and it ended up leading the city to get stuck with a $200 million termination fee. Does that give you pause that this bad experience happened in Denver, which by all accounts is a pretty well-run city?
It does, as a matter of fact. I think it's very instructive, and that certainly whatever agreement, if we were to get to that point, whatever agreement would have to be really well written with a lot of standards and a lot of operating procedures so that we didn't get into a situation like that.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time today. The time has just flown. I guess that's what happens when you get a lot of callers. And we want to thank the people who called in that we didn't get to. Hopefully, we'll have Mayor Lyda Krewson back. So thank you so much.
Back.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for joining us
Appreciate
today. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.